Welcome to ScriptSnap. Today, we're diving into the sci-fi horror thriller Life. The story begins aboard the International Space Station, where a specialized team of 6 prepares for a mission that could change human history. Their objective: to intercept the Pilgrim, a satellite capsule returning from Mars carrying soil samples that may contain proof of extraterrestrial life. However, the mission hits a major snag early on. The Pilgrim has been damaged by space debris and is veering dangerously off course. Rory, the team's engineer, suits up for a high-stakes spacewalk. His mission is to step outside the station and use a massive mechanical arm to manually catch the speeding capsule. Inside the station, the atmosphere is thick with tension. Commander Ekaterina and Flight Engineer Sho oversee the docking from the command center, while the station's Dr. David monitors Rory's vitals. Through the viewing portal, the lead scientist, Hugh, watches as the Pilgrim barrels toward them. Rory maneuvers the arm into position, and as the capsule makes contact, the entire space station jolts violently. The crew is thrown back by the impact, but as the dust settles, they see Rory has done it. The Pilgrim is secure. Back on Earth, NASA erupts in cheers as the mission is declared a success. In the isolation of the station's lab, Hugh begins the delicate process of analyzing the Martian soil. Under a microscope, he identifies a dormant, almost fossilized cell. At first, the organism is unresponsive. But as Hugh mimics the atmosphere of a prehistoric Earth and introduces a specialized growth medium, the impossible happens. The cell begins to move. Hugh can't help but laugh in pure wonder. They have officially confirmed the existence of life from another world. The discovery becomes a global phenomenon. During a live broadcast with Earth, the astronauts speak to a group of students who have been given the honor of naming the organism. The children choose a friendly, unassuming name: Calvin. With the initial excitement behind them, the crew returns to their routines. Hugh and Rory trade friendly jabs while repairing the station's systems, while Miranda, a CDC quarantine officer, checks on David. She is worried about David's health. He has been on the station for a record-breaking amount of time. But David is dismissive of her concerns. He tells her he feels more at home in the silence of space than he ever did on Earth. But as they continue their tests the following day, the crew is about to learn that Calvin is much more than just a simple cell, and its will to survive is greater than they ever imagined. In the weeks that follow, Calvin's growth defies all biological expectations. Hugh discovers that the organism is now composed of hundreds of cells, forming a complex neural network. But unlike any creature on Earth, Calvin's cells are multifunctional. Every single cell acts as a muscle, a nerve, and a photoreceptor simultaneously. As Hugh puts it, the creature is all brain, all muscle, and all eye. The crew watches with a mix of fascination and unease as Calvin develops long, translucent appendages. During a rare moment of downtime, the team gathers for dinner to celebrate Sho's newborn daughter via a video call to Earth. It's a fleeting moment of humanity before the isolation of the station begins to take its toll. The peace is shattered when a containment alarm rocks the station. An atmospheric malfunction in the lab causes Calvin to suddenly go dormant. While Hugh is frustrated by the setback, Miranda is quietly relieved. To her, Calvin's rapid growth was becoming a threat. She reminds the team that their primary directive is containment. The safety of the crew must always come before the survival of the specimen. Hugh, however, is blinded by the scientific potential. He believes Calvin's unique cellular structure could hold the key to curing every known disease on Earth. Desperate to continue his research, he proposes a risky move: a mild electric shock to jumpstart the creature's metabolism. Against the crew's better judgment, Hugh applies the shock. The reaction is instantaneous and violent. Calvin springs to life, lunging at Hugh's hand with terrifying speed. The creature's grip is like a vice, snapping the electric wand in half. Hugh's face contorts in agony as Calvin begins to squeeze, methodically folding his fingers into unnatural, sickening angles. The lab is filled with Hugh's screams. Outside the glass, the crew is in an uproar, but Miranda holds them back. Opening the door now would risk a catastrophic breach. Within seconds, the sound of bone snapping echoes through the station. Hugh collapses into unconsciousness, floating limply in the zero-gravity environment. But Calvin isn't finished. Using a sharp fragment from the broken wand, the creature intelligently pierces the rubber containment glove and slides out into the lab. The crew watches in horror as the alien stalks a lab rat, wrapping its body around the animal and digesting it in seconds. Seeing an opening, Rory ignores protocol and rushes into the lab to retrieve the unconscious Hugh. He manages to pass Hugh out to David, but as he tries to exit, the crew sees Calvin latch onto Rory's leg. David is forced to slam the door, sealing Rory inside with the predator. Desperate, Rory grabs an oxygen candle and unleashes a jet of flame, searing the creature until it lets go. Recognizing that the situation has escalated into a lethal threat, Commander Ekaterina issues the final, grim order: kill it. In the lab, the hunt is on. Rory arms himself with an incinerator, determined to turn the hunter into the hunted. He bathes the lab in jets of flame, forcing Calvin to scurry into the shadows. Rory finally corners the creature, believing he has trapped it inside a small container, but when he opens it, the container is empty. In a terrifying display of speed, Calvin lunges from behind, latching onto Rory's face. The crew watches in paralyzed silence as the creature forces itself into Rory's mouth. Within seconds, Rory begins to convulse, and a sickening amount of blood spews into the zero-gravity environment. Rory is gone. The incinerator, still active, triggers the fire suppressant system, filling the room with gas. From the remains of Rory's body, Calvin emerges, having grown 100-fold in size and strength. Panic sets in. Commander Ekaterina and Sho race to manually close the vents before Calvin can use the gas lines to escape the lab. They are a split second too late. Calvin squeezes through the final valve, just as it slams shut, disappearing into the station's internal systems. The situation turns from bad to worse when the crew discovers the station's communication array has failed. Ekaterina suits up for an emergency spacewalk to investigate. When she opens the transmitter's coolant chamber, she finds it bone dry. Hugh, now conscious and recovering from his injuries, realizes the terrifying truth. Calvin isn't just a predator, it's a survivor that has learned to consume the station's coolant for sustenance. Before Ekaterina can react, Calvin launches itself from the shadows of the machinery, latching onto her suit. In the struggle, the alien ruptures her coolant line. Within moments, toxic liquid begins to flood Ekaterina's helmet. She is drowning inside her own suit. She makes a desperate leap for the airlock, where David is waiting to pull her inside. But as she reaches the lever, Ekaterina looks through the liquid at her team. She realizes that if she enters, Calvin enters with her. In a final, heroic act of defiance, she turns the lever in the opposite direction, locking herself out and drifting into the void. David and Miranda can only watch as their commander drowns in the silence of space. The trauma of the loss is interrupted by a new threat. Sho realizes that Calvin could enter the station through the thruster vents. He begins a frantic game of whack-a-mole, igniting the thrusters every time sensors detect a temperature change. But the constant firing burns through their fuel reserves and knocks the station out of its stable orbit. In the chaos, Calvin manages to slip back inside. Hugh, reflecting on the creature's resilience, theorizes that Calvin's species likely dominated Mars for eons, only entering hibernation when the planet's atmosphere collapsed. He proposes a radical plan: simulate the death of Mars. The crew will retreat to a single, reinforced capsule and vent the oxygen from the rest of the station to force Calvin back into its dormant state. As they seal themselves off, the atmosphere is heavy with guilt. Hugh, growing visibly weaker, blames himself for the catastrophe. He reminds the others that Calvin isn't malicious, it's simply a survivor, and for Calvin to live, the humans must die. As the oxygen levels drop, Hugh's strength fails, and he slips into unconsciousness, leaving the remaining crew to wonder if they are sealing themselves in a tomb. The silence of the safe zone is broken when Miranda notices a sickening movement beneath the fabric of Hugh's flight suit. She unzips his leg to reveal a nightmare. Calvin has been inside the room the entire time, feeding on Hugh's paralyzed lower body. The crew scrambles back in horror. Miranda attempts to drive the creature off with a defibrillator shock, but it only succeeds in drawing Calvin's attention. In the ensuing chaos, the team is split. Sho is forced into the sleeping pods while David stays with Miranda as Hugh breathes his last. A silver lining emerges from the tragedy. Calvin has swallowed Hugh's biometric tracker. Now, the creature's every move is visible on the station's holograms. David and Miranda waste no time, locking down the station and purging the oxygen from every other compartment. As Calvin begins to suffocate, a proximity alarm blares. A Soyuz shuttle is docking. But this isn't a rescue. Miranda reveals a dark truth. The Soyuz is a failsafe. Its mission is to push the entire station into deep space, ensuring that if containment fails, the parasite never reaches Earth. Unaware of the suicide mission, Sho breaks cover and rushes toward the Soyuz, hoping for a way home. He reaches the hatch just as Calvin ambushes him from the shadows. David and Miranda watch through the glass in helpless agony as the airlock seals fail. The Soyuz is ripped away, the Russian cosmonauts are devoured, and Sho is sucked into the vacuum of space. Calvin, however, is a survivor. It clings to the station's hull, crawling back inside as the structure begins to tear apart. With the station's orbit decaying and only 30 minutes of oxygen left, David makes a final, desperate play. He knows Calvin is hunting for air. He decides to use himself as bait, luring the creature into one of the 2 remaining escape pods with oxygen candles. His plan is a suicide mission. He will lead Calvin into deep space, while Miranda takes the second pod to return to Earth and warn humanity. The plan is set in motion. David traverses the crumbling station, the creature literally hugging the oxygen candle in his hand. He lures Calvin into the pod, and as the alien wraps its body around him, he hammers the launch button. Moments later, Miranda launches her own pod, beginning her descent through the atmosphere. As she falls, Miranda records a final black box message. Her voice is steady but haunted. Treat all Martian life as a lethal threat. Kill it on sight. But space is unpredictable. Both pods strike a cloud of debris during the separation. In David's pod, he screams in agony as Calvin begins to cocoon him, but he fights to keep the controls aimed at the void. In Miranda's pod, the navigation systems begin to haywire, the thrusters firing uncontrollably. The two vessels drift apart, one screaming into the dark of the universe, the other burning through the atmosphere toward the ocean below. One pod finally hits the water with a massive splash. On the calm waters of the Pacific, local fishermen watch as a scorched metal capsule streaks across the sky and slams into the ocean. Believing they are witnessing a miraculous rescue, they steer their boats toward the smoking wreckage. As they pull alongside the pod and peer through the thick, reinforced glass, the horror is revealed. Inside is David, but he isn't alone. His body is almost entirely encased in a thick, translucent web of alien flesh. Calvin has completely cocooned him, holding him alive as a source of warmth and sustenance. High above in the silence of the void, the plan has failed. Miranda's pod, its navigation system shattered by the debris, is the one hurtling into deep space. She screams in the darkness, drifting farther and farther away from the planet she was supposed to save. Back on the water, the fishermen begin to pry at the hatch. David, barely visible through the biological web, frantically shakes his head. He screams at them to stay away, to let him sink, to let him die, but the fishermen can't hear him through the hull. They think he's a survivor in need of help. As more fishing boats converge on the site, they work together to force the lever. The seal hisses, the door begins to creak open, and the door to Earth's extinction is unlocked. If you want to see more sci-fi horror breakdowns like this, make sure to subscribe to Script Snap. Don't forget to hit the notification bell and leave a like to support the channel. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there.